Could I please get the first panelist to the stage, please? We're going to be talking about the future of software development, predictions for 2020. And we're going to be talking with Maria, Martin, Terry, and Tobias. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Does anybody need a stick mic?
I don't know.
None of us is mic'd up.
Who's moderating? Cool. I would recommend having one amongst y'all and one here. That's fine.
I love how everyone agrees and no one grabs the microphone.
Yeah, maybe I should sit in the middle?
Yeah?
So you take that one, I take this one. We're all good.
Okay, are we live? Okay, good. So, hope you had your coffee. Hope that you're going to be chatty today because we have great people here on stage and hopefully you will have questions for them. My name is Maria. I'm an IT recruiter. Don't run, please. I will not recruit you today, maybe tomorrow. We have here today great guys. Maybe have you seen on the agenda of the talk. We have today Terry Ryan here. We have Martin and Tobias. I would let them present themselves, say a few words about them, and then we're gonna start the party, okay? Okay, so Terry, please.
Thank you very much. I'll try not to blow anybody's eardrums out. I'm Terry Ryan. I'm a developer advocate for Google Cloud Platform, so I deal a lot with the cloud, the move to the cloud, and I'll be talking today about Kubernetes, but I kind of like all of the infrastructure pieces of the cloud and love talking about all of it.
Sweet. Good morning, everybody. How are you feeling? Wonderful. I'm Martin from Zurich. I work for a startup called Archilogic, and we do 3D on the web, so I'm sort of representing the web stage here for now. And I hope that you have a lot of questions, so just please bring your questions towards us. Thanks. Oh, you have one.
Hello, my name is Tobias. I'm with Akamai Technologies, and I'm a solutions architect and evangelist for web performance at Akamai. In my free time, I usually enjoy to hike and run around and try to become more minimalist. So if you want to talk to me about that, that's fine, because talking about my work is kind of boring, you know? So yeah, if you want to talk about more interesting stuff, look me up.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentations. As you've seen today, the topic will be the future of software development. I think it's a topic that interests us all. The transition to 2020, and I would like to start by giving the stage for each participant of the panel to give an intro, maybe regarding this subject, and then we will be waiting your questions. Of course, I have a few questions, so feel free to raise your hand if you have questions, and the mic will come towards your way. So, who wants to start with the short intro about the software, the future of software development? Okay, go Terry.
All right, I'll go up first to the firing squad here. What is 2020 going to look like? I'm a big believer in the democratization of complex things. And if you look at the history of the web, things, just not the history of web, the history of computing, as things start out, they are in the hands of just experts, right? You look at, if you remember, if you were in the industry 15, 20 years ago, the idea that you would run your own database, right, was crazy. You had these experts, and they were DBAs, and they didn't let you touch anything about them, about the technology, not them either. That would be creepy as well. But and slowly over the last 15 to 20 years, we've seen that I don't know of a single dev that has never at least fired up a database. So, and you look through the entire stack, storage, operating system, like everything that you need to run your systems, all in all, more and more of it has become democratized. So what is the next set of things that's going to become democratized and turn from an area for experts to only use to everyday developers to use as simply a tool? We've seen it with big data. Big data is increasingly becoming something that everyday kind of general developers are able to pick up and use in their own tooling. And I see the future being machine learning. Machine learning right now, training computers to do things, to figure out things that we think only human beings can figure out, is something that right now is in the hands of experts. But we are looking to, at least for Google, we are looking to democratize it, to make it a tool that every developer can pick up and use. We're not there yet. We have a couple open source projects around machine learning to hope make it more democratic, to make it more universal. But it is not there yet. So I see in the next 5 years, 2020, I think that is one thing that we're going to see. Machine learning and big data increasingly being tools and not the domain of experts.
Great, thank you very much, Terry. Martin?
So I believe that's absolutely right, and I'd like to tackle the same thing from a slightly different perspective. With everything becoming commoditized, everyone is able to run software and create software and do things. Like creating your own company and basically selling services or goods to the entire world is really, really easy because all you need is a website and you can just click your server and basically really quickly install, I don't know, WordPress or something, and then you have some web presence that allows you to connect with the world. But because of that, because software gets into the hands of more people, not just as users, but also as creators, there will be different ways of educating people and different ways of communicating technical concepts. Right now, the most standard curriculum has been you have been in computer science or something related, and then you got into programming and you had a schooling and you had education for, I don't know, a decade or so, and then you actually got your hands on real stuff. But now that it's hopefully soon is going to be in the hands of everyone, we really need to have a conversation on how we communicate this, because the danger is that we are enfeebling creators, as developers, fellow developers that are not coming from a classical schooling, when we do not make sure that we are empowering them by good communication, good documentation, and ways to exchange ideas and exchange technology. And I believe now that we have the building blocks ready in development, so IDEs are a solved problem, databases are a solved problem, servers and operations are more or less a solved problem. It becomes time to extend this into documentation because we do not really have a good ways of communicating ideas and concepts. So I think this will become important in your role as a developer, communicating technical issues and contents to non-technical people.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Tobias?
Yeah, I can only, hopefully, also go into the same direction. I also strongly believe in automation, so in AI and machine learning and the automation of processes. This is something we've been seeing for large companies as well as startups in the recent past, and I think this is only going to get stronger. So to make sense of big data, to make sense of context that might even at the beginning not make sense to a human mind, because the machine has more time and more energy to pursue this. And to go into the direction of what Martin was just saying, I think an interesting aspect of that is that I'm pretty sure in 2020 we're going to see people with more than one skill set on their mind working on these things, because you need to be inspired by different fields of technology, by different sciences to come up with these questions and maybe even define new answers. When we look at where modern inspiration for algorithms, for example, comes from, it's from biology and physics. So I think pretty soon we're going to see people who are capable in more than just computer sciences or more in just web design, because we're going to need hybrid people, basically, people who can think outside of one field and be inspired by another and take this into the realm of machine learning and teach these machines new things and get more interesting answers out of that. So this is a big trend I'm seeing. And based on that, I think technology-wise, I'm pretty sure in 2020 we're going to be getting closer to get JavaScript close to C performance, which will enable developers again to write more interesting stuff, because this race about getting JavaScript engines faster and faster is about enabling developers at the end of the day to make them run stuff maybe in 2 to 4 years at a fraction of C. That would be amazing. I think by 2020 we might be about at 70–80% of the performance of C, and that is on JavaScript code. That would be amazing and enable lots of people to do that. So I'm thinking in 2020 JavaScript will not have gone away, it will only have gotten stronger. We can see that also with tools like WebAssembly, for example. I'm pretty sure WebAssembly is going to pick up in the future too. So JavaScript is just going to become more and more important.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll assume I will have some clients asking me for JavaScript developers soon enough. Okay, just to get you a head start and to leave you a few minutes to think about the questions that you want to address to the guys, I would like to remain in the area of what you've just said, because I was thinking just at that, from what I've seen on the other side of the barricade, from the recruiting part, there are more and more companies, various types of companies, either corporations or small companies, who are not looking just for developers. We're not searching for Java or .NET or JavaScript developer anymore. We're looking for technologists. So what would be your advice for the public today, for the developers present here, in terms of trainings, skills? What should they train? What should they learn to be more technologists than just developers?
May I answer that one? So I believe that's not a recent trend, but that's something that has been there below the surface already. Who here has heard of the T-shaped employee? Okay, that's not as many as I thought. So basically, I believe that we always will need and always needed specialists. However, specialists will not be able to do all the complexity that we have. So right now we have this issue of, you have something that works on the back end, but the domain of the back end, just how you think about problems and how you architecture problems for back end systems are different than for the front end. So if you are a front end developer, you might find it very, very challenging, if not impossible, to actually think about this other domain. So I believe it might not be the technology that is the problem. Like, there will probably still be JavaScript developers or Swift developers or Java developers, Java being in Android. So, but I believe what's important for everyone to understand is you should not only have one tool to work with. If you're a craftsman, if you consider yourself a software craftsman or a woman, you should not have just one tool. Because if the only thing you have is one tool, then everything looks like the thing this tool works with. To sort of paraphrase on, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Or if the only thing you have is Java, then everything looks like a null pointer exception. Besides that, ooh, he said something against Java. Besides that, I really believe that you should have more than one tool to solve problems, and you should work on understanding different problem domains. If you think of yourself as a backend developer, try building a web application, not because the web is the future, just because it has very different challenges. If you were a front-end developer and go like, I know Angular and React, that's cool, but just try to build something in Java, in Scala, in Swift, just to get out of your comfort zone and understand the fundamentals, the fundamental problems and challenges at hand. Because this is actually bringing you forward and allows you to bring more value to your business and your customers and your clients.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin.
Do you mind if I build on that? So I think Martin makes really great points. And to expand on it, one of the things I would caution everybody as you're building up your skill set and you're kind of going out into the industry is to be very careful about identity. And what I mean by that is, so I've worked in developer outreach for about 8 years now, and I've seen technologies rise and die, and the people that have the hardest time dealing with sort of the churn of technology are the people that identify themselves too strongly with an individual technology. So as you go out, you're not a JavaScript developer. You're a front-end developer, or you're a back-end developer, even if you're using Node on the back end. But don't think of yourselves in terms of the technology. Be very clear in your mind that these are tools that you use and that they may rise and they may fall. And that's just one thing to be. I've seen too many people have trouble when the industry changes to not point this out, that it's very important to not put your tools into your identity. You are not a hammerist, you are a carpenter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with these two. They're absolutely right about that thing. What I would like to add to that is, I think communication skill is something that we also definitely have to address in modern employees. So don't just think about a certain technology, a certain field of study that you want to follow up with, that's what do you want to educate yourself with, but also think about your soft skills that you want to develop. And I think a good way to do that is actually study two fields. So everybody has been bashing the humanities in the last couple of years. I'm just thinking, I love the humanities. They actually teach you how to think about problems and how to communicate about them. So I don't want to see people in my team who like just Terry mentioned, who are very, very strongly opinioned about one certain technology and who are bad about communicating about this as well. I want people who are open-minded and who can think dynamically on the spot and who can bring a new approach to a problem. And those are people who have outbranched their way of thinking. So I like how sciences that are not natively technological bring in new value to our field. I really love that. So I wouldn't want to write the humanities off. And because they also teach you how to communicate successfully in a company, which at least in a company as large as Akamai, this is a hugely important skill. Because you need to communicate with people in order to get stuff done. There are so many people, and if you're bad at communicating, no matter how strong your agenda is, you won't get anywhere. You need to figure out how to communicate properly, and you can learn that. It's a skill you can learn. It's not something that is given to you in childhood or at birth. It's something you can train just as any other skill you can hone. And I really want to see that the future brings us more of these kind of people who can communicate clearly, who can put ideas in concisely. This is something I'm really looking for in team players in my team.
Thank you very much, Tobias. I think it's the purpose of these events as well. As the name says, it we're DevTalks. So the purpose is to talk, to communicate, and to share. Okay, do we have questions from the public? Because I do have a series of questions, but I would rather you have questions for the guys. Just raise your hand. Okay, please.
Hello guys, I'm Yuri from Indava. So why 2020?
I guess that's a fair question. So why 2020? I think 2020 is not too far away. We could have said like 2050, but then again, 2050, to be honest, I'm really bad at predicting what I'm going to have for lunch. So that's far on out. And with the field changing as quickly as technology, and basically technology is reaching into all the other fields, I guess 2020 is the most we can do, and it's a nice round number. Unless, I don't actually, what was the reason for picking that one? Do you know?
We'll have to ask the organizers. No, from what I know, I think Gartner actually launched the idea, is the transition to 2020, if I'm not mistaken, because it's a landmark, if you want. 2020 will be the year that will bring an innovation, something, let's say, brutal, in quotes, that will change in software development as well. So that's why we picked 2020, so by Gartner. Blame Gartner. Okay, that answers your question? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Jessica is there, so she can bring you the mic. One of the organizers. No, so no other questions?
There's a question.
Oh, go.
Multiple questions now.
Yay.
Thanks, Lily.
Compete, yeah. The free
Hey,
market
thanks.
will solve it.
Okay, so my name is Alex. I work for ING. My question would be, so you talked a lot about technology, but I think one of the biggest issues that at least I have encountered up until this point is pushing change towards new technologies and new ways of working, towards people or management who are used to a way of delivering, and things have, I think, gone to a faster and faster pace. So how would you say advocating change towards stakeholders, product owners, managers, etc.?
So I'm sorry, I have to shamelessly plug a book I wrote called Driving Technical Change. It's exactly that. So I'll kind of give you a kind of quick overview of what I say in the book, and I'm happy I will gratis you a copy if you like what you hear. So basically change is very challenging, and no matter where you are, and this is one of the, I think, the mistakes we make in technology, we assume, you know what, if I get to a better company, I won't have this problem with change, right? And so I have gone from one of the best business schools of the US, working there, not attending, working at one of the best business schools of the US, to working for Adobe, to working for Google, and in all of those places I've seen problems with change. So driving change is something you're going to have to learn how to do. It is a relatively simple process. What you do is you basically identify the people who are opposing your change. You kind of categorize them, and this is the way they're resisting. And then you kind of use these tactical things to make those changes happen. So, for example, someone who is cynical, who is just they're knee-jerk against any new technology because I don't believe anything anyone ever says about anything. You have to use a different thing on them versus someone who doesn't know about the technology versus someone who's tried the technology and failed with it. So you basically put together a broad strategy of targeting people with individual tactics. You get a coalition of people around, and maybe you're lucky and you convince everybody you don't have to get management involved. Yeah. So what you do is after you get all that, you get the stragglers that won't come, you get management to make a rule. Yeah. So that's the process. Like I said, I'd be happy to give you a copy of the book. The important thing to note, though, is that when you're going to these changes, make sure you understand the idea that getting to that perfect place is like nearly impossible. Getting everything you want is a hard challenge, but between where you are right now and where you want to go, you can make a lot of incremental change along the way. So, anyone else?
Thank you. I'm in the happy position that my wife does agile transitions and change management, so I learned a lot from her. I only facilitated change in a team and in a company on a larger scale once, so I don't have that much experience. I mean, it's one data point, so who am I to talk? But my wife has done that more successfully, and what I've learned from her is something that I already touched on with my torch for the humanities. I think the key here is, like Terry already mentioned now, communication and identifying the stakeholders, and what I'd say is to identify the way how they communicate and think. Because different departments, C-level, marketing, content people, they all are judged by different KPIs than developers do. And as a successful developer in a cross-functional team, the key skill is to be able to talk in the language of the other people. So to identify that C-level wants to have a certain KPI that indicates to them how much value a feature brings. And this is often a dollar sign, but not always. Sometimes companies measure something like team happiness. And this is also a valuable thing. So depending on what kind of change you're driving, you need to identify which KPIs are important to these blockers of a change and then communicate to them in the language that they will understand. Because asking them to understand your technological point of view, saying like, this will make our code run 20% faster, they don't care. But if you tell them that's going to increase conversions by 5%, they will care, if that is a KPI that they can think about.
Thank you very much. Martin, any input on that?
Yeah. So I agree, but I add one thing, which is be careful that not all change is good change. So if you see opposition, you should really, that goes in these directions, that you should figure out where that comes from and if it's valid. Because not all change is necessarily good change, and if there is opposition, they may have a point. I think there's a danger that a lot of people, especially agile teams, happen to sort of go like, yeah, let's just do it. But if it's obviously a problem, or if it's obviously not thought through, then opposition should be taken seriously. I'm on the side of going, yeah, let's do it, and because, agile, try, inspect, adapt. But sometimes that actually can be problematic, especially, for instance, if you're an early stage startup, and you do, hey, we have this switch to another language, which will not allow us to ship any new features, but we're going to be 20% faster. These 20% will be great at a later stage, but maybe not right now, where you even try to figure out if your product will stick in the market. So if there's someone opposing, going like, shouldn't we just, first of all, identify if we're building the right product? Then that's a valid opposition. So do not just assume that change will be always great. Really try to understand the opposition. And then if there is opposition that should be overcome and doesn't want to be, then address this strategically. But really listen to the opposition first.
Thank you very much, guys. I hope that answers your question. We have another question there.
Here, and then it's all you. Sorry.
What's happening?
Oh, I got you. I'm going to stay right here.
Hello, my name is Katarin Stojovic. I work at Societe Generale What do you feel the current roles involved in the software development lifecycle will change in the transition to 2020? I'm talking about software developer, tester, business analyst, project manager. How do you feel will that shift in the future?
Thank you very much. Who wants to answer?
I go first again. I believe we're already seeing a shift right now. Cross-functional teams is one thing that is important. If you are from the Church of Scrum, then you might have seen that already as well, that testing becomes part of the development lifecycle every day. So theoretically, every developer should test as well, and all the stakeholders should be at least involved to some degree into testing. I believe the roles will blur, which doesn't mean that they will erode entirely. I do believe there is still the roles will still exist, they will just have different responsibilities. For instance, testers, I believe, are here in an optimal team. Testers have the role of helping and sort of enabling others to write test cases, run the tests, and make sure the software works as expected and as specified. And also, I believe they will have the responsibility to make sure it happens. In contrast to having to do all that themselves. So I believe it's more about collaborating rather than dividing work. Beforehand, roles have mostly been dividing work and responsibility, and I believe the division will happen more in a more agile way in the future, as it already is in some teams. That will probably be seen in broader spec. But I do believe it's mostly about experience, interest, and sort of responsibility that roles will fill in.
Okay, so that answers the questions, I hope. You can chat with the guys after. Any other questions?
Got it.
Hi. How do you think backend development will be in 2020 in relation to technologies like Firebase, backend as a service, or microservice architectures? How is it going to evolve?
Could you repeat a bit louder, please?
How do you think development, backend development, will be in 2020 in relation to Firebase, backend as a service, or microservice architectures?
So, thank you for mentioning Firebase. We're very proud of Firebase as a technology. And so, yeah, Firebase is going to take over the whole world, and we'll never need backend developers ever again. So realistically, I see it just being yet another tool that people can that in most cases front end developers need. But for most of what I've seen on working with the Firebase team, there's a lot of need for Firebase Plus, right? There's Firebase Plus, a little extra storage, or Firebase Plus a little extra code, and so the team is working on that, and I believe, I forget where it is in the alpha beta list, but there's interesting stuff coming from Firebase. So I don't think these technologies in any way, shape, or form will reduce the amount of back-end code needed. It just is enabling front-end devs to do more stuff without having to necessarily bother, either to prototype, basically make it easier to prototype, or make it easier to not have to deal with a back-end. But that being said, all that's doing is taking, like, when you look at things like Firebase and the Facebook one that now is just escaping me, Parse. You look at these tools, all they're doing is enabling more people to do more things, not taking away work from other spaces. So I don't think they're going to have a giant impact on back-end development. You mentioned microservices and that's sort of separate from the Firebase and client pieces. I think the only major change there is you're going to have to know how to write a Docker file, and how to troubleshoot Docker. Luckily Docker for Mac is coming out soon, and that's going to make a lot of Docker troubleshooting a lot easier. But that's my take on it. That I don't see these things having a huge impact on back end. I see it just being that more people can do more things. It's just going to enable more creativity and not necessarily take a lot away from the back end.
since I originally come from the front end, I am probably not the best person to answer this, but I have an opinion on this, so I'm jumping right in. I think what I'm seeing the last couple of months or maybe a year now is a move towards more serverless architecture. And like Terry just mentioned, I think what's going to happen is that traditional backend developers will be more involved in creating technology that will run without a traditional backend. Because when we look at internet usage numbers and internet distribution right now, we know that the first billion have been hooked up and that the second billion people coming online don't have the same infrastructure in place in their countries right now. So that's why we see a strong trend into offline first design. Because we know that lots of people will use apps, will use web services on devices that are not constantly connected to a cell tower or to a Wi-Fi network. So what I'm seeing is that backend-like functionality will become client-side, and that backend developers will bring their knowledge into that development process.
Yes, but. Yes, I'm the yes, but guy. I'm the well-actuallying you now. Yes, but I think that doesn't mean that the backends will go away or will be reduced. You still need the same functionality. It's just how you interact. That's more about the interface between the two than the actual backend. But I believe the backend, so having done both front-end and back-end, we will see some stuff that is traditionally back-end on the front-end, like storing stuff as long as you're offline and then syncing with the back-end, rather than just pushing and hoping that it sticks. But for the back-end, I believe it, as you said, it doesn't take away. Well, it does take away, but it doesn't take away as in it takes away our jobs or our work that has to be done there. It just takes away the boring stuff. It takes away the glue code that I have to write about around a authorization or authentication library. It takes away the glue code and the storage layer. So I just have another API where I push stuff to, and then it sticks somewhere, and I can retrieve it whenever I need it. But I believe it will enable us to actually focus on the interesting stuff in the back end. So the real business problems, the real users' problems, rather than spending a day or a week or something to figure out which libraries I'm going to use for all these certain tasks that I always have. I can just offload that to others that have solved this problem, like Firebase, like Parse, like all that. And I just get a solid solution that is their problem. Serverless is not really serverless. It's still servers. It's like Soylent Green is still people. It's someone else's problem, and that's the cool stuff about the cloud. If in a cloud there is a network outage, I don't get paged. That's someone else's problem now. Hopefully they go do it correctly. If not, I'm going to switch providers. But with serverless, you even do not care about spinning up machines or anything. You just say, like, this code has to run on this instance. When this thing happens, I want to run this code, and then it should produce this that goes there. And so you basically only have a pipeline, which allows you to not just reduce the amount of work, but actually focus more and do more for your particular problem and your particular use case, rather than writing the glue code. It's more or less like with MVC. In 2003 or something, everyone wrote their own MVC frameworks for PHP and JavaScript and everything, and we have 5,000 of them now. Now everyone writes their own virtual DOM apparently, and like 2 years ago everyone wrote their own static site generator, and I guess now it's chatbots or something, I don't know. But instead of doing that, instead of providing the infrastructure, you have someone that sort of, the level of what becomes infrastructure as in someone else's problem is raised. So that doesn't mean that our part is shrinking, it just shifts upward in the stack. And shifting upward also means we now have to talk to people. Sorry, right? So yeah.
Thank you very much. So we insist on the idea to talking to people. Any other questions? There. We have a question there.
Hello. Hello. I'm hearing? Okay. My name is Alizan.
A bit louder, and the mic maybe.
My name is, okay.
Great.
Thank you. My name is Alizan Froiu from ESI Bucharest. How do you see the interoperability in 2020, and what do you think it will be the importance of the JavaScript in the assurance of interoperability between system and different types of systems?
Who wants to jump on that? Yes,
Interoperability is where I'm most nervous because I really, really hope that interoperability will get better. However, all the signs out there say it's not. For some reason, we have recently fallen into the trap of loving silos and siloed up data. So I have my photos synced with, or some of my photos synced with Facebook and Google and Dropbox. And I'm like, really? Is that the 90s code? They want their data storage model back. I hope that's going to change, especially there is initiatives that try to be more decentralized, but by that they actually mean just centralized with us. Let's see how that goes. And regarding interoperability between systems and languages, I think the microservices trend will help there, because in the end, all you care about is the contracts between components, and as long as they're in interoperable ways, which we have many, various ways of RPC, request response over HTTPS and all that. So we have ways to talk that are platform independent, but I don't think that we'll entirely overcome the issue of not being able to talk to different, like a library is probably not going to be interoperable with all the languages in 2020, but it's probably not a library anymore, but a service that you can connect to and use from whatever.
Yeah, I'll go. So I think Martin brings up an interesting point, and he talked, I think, mostly about the software. Then you have the business part of it, which, it's totally cool to be focused on the software. And I think software is going to get better, and exactly what you said. I am pessimistic on the business side. Mostly because I've been seeing that there is a lot of trend to lock people into particular solutions. How do I do this without being salesy? So Google, we believe in, and I'm not a sales guy, so I can say this with I feel a certain amount of assurance. We would rather have multi-cloud solutions, for example, in my area. And so we want to make it easy for people to come back and forth between us and other places. Other businesses in these spaces have different strategies. In general, you look at the history, you look at Microsoft, what they were able to do with the market back in the 90s, and how they took market share away from other places. They were able to do it by being open and basically we'll take anything and we'll make it easy to export out. But businesses kind of go back and forth on whether or not they really want to do that, whether or not it's working for them. So in the software side, on the open source side, I would say always count on it. It's getting better and better. But on the business side, it really just depends on which is going to drive more business in the short term, which is sad, but it is a truth.
On the business side, I sadly have to agree with Terry. I also see more vendor lock-in right now. My current worry goes mostly towards content lock-in. So when I'm looking at the Apple News, Google AMP, and Facebook pages, I see the walled garden all over again, but this time for content. When I hear that these providers are now building their own undersea cable infrastructure, private undersea cables, and they're also starting to host the content instead just serving, say, search results or something, then I'm starting to worry that soon I'll only be able to read certain news if I have a subscription to X. And I understand the publisher's point of view from this, because technology is so complex nowadays that they like to jump into an easy solution that promises them lots of exposure without a high technological debt. But I do love my open web, and I'm always worried when I see these trends. But the long-term thing is, Terry already touched on that, is that we see these pendulum movements going back and forth. So what we can take away from as positive aspects from this is that the open web technologies might be inspired by proprietary technologies and moves we see into that direction right now. And maybe we can learn a technological twist or two from them. So for example, from the AMP team, there's a lot already good communication happening between the AMP team and other companies to open up these technologies and bring them into the browser, for example. And maybe then in a couple of years we'll have a far more open web again. But right now, interoperability, I think, is a big issue.
Quickly in defense of AMP, though, they're not hosting it themselves, so it's still hosted with you. It will still be hosted with you probably, so that it's not an either or. And I think, I'm not entirely sure about that one, but I think AMP markup is backwards compatible with HTML-ish. It uses web components, so that should be fine-ish. But yeah, the danger is that we fall back into CompuServe versus AOL versus whatever times, so let's not make that happen. Let's fight for the open web.
Thank you very much. So, ish. Any other questions? We have a question there. There. Okay, go.
Hello. 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 I'm Yavi, and have a less technical question.
A bit louder, please.
My question is around what do you think are the main changes with regards to working environment for big teams?
Big teams. Working environment for big teams. So what I'm seeing in the companies I have insight into right now, I'm seeing that teams become more distributed and that remote work becomes more possible in more companies. So more of the larger and also traditional companies are at least considering it now, and there are companies who are switching towards it more rapidly. I'm aware of Microsoft, for example, is very remote friendly right now, and teams can be distributed worldwide now because of that. So that's a nice move that I'm seeing. I also have the feeling that we have an abundance of collaboration tools now that enable big teams to operate better. Microsoft has just launched one, I think yesterday, and there are tools out there that enable us to pretty much do anything right now. And with enough bandwidth, we can even have like remote presences, like video conferences all the time. It's something I did with my last company. We had like a big-ass 50-inch screen with a video camera that was on all the time between two locations. So we basically had the feeling that both teams were sitting in the same room. That actually worked quite nicely. I think the more experienced team players gain in big teams, the better they become in communicating this. So I'm thinking big teams also will become more efficient, because usually when a team has a certain size, it creates a certain overhead, becomes less efficient. But I'm seeing that as the more experienced the players inside the team get, the better they handle this. So I'm thinking big remote teams are a structure that has a future right now.
I myself am on a relatively large size team. I'm 25 people to one boss, and then the larger organization is a couple hundreds of people. And we don't do development in sync with each other. We do outreach, and we may take on tasks and whatnot, but we don't tend to work on massive software projects together. But from what I've seen, there's sort of this same the pendulum. It comes up again, where companies sort of sometimes let people be remote and then pull back and say, no, we're finding that people are much more efficient when they're all on the same team. And like Google is sort of famous for this. You have to work in an office. You can't work remotely, which was a little bit of a culture shock coming from a company like Adobe, which is very much cooler with that. So what I see is it's going to depend on the culture of the business at hand. I think it's becoming increasingly, that's what startups do. Like, we're all got to be remote. We're going to find the best people in the best place and not worry about where they are. And so I think you're going to run into companies. I've seen it in the last 5 years, at least in the US, where they're kind of getting away from remote, and it's sad, but is just, for now. Yahoo made a big noise doing it, and I think other people are following suit, because a lot of times it's cargo cult, like, oh, big company X is doing this, we'll do it. And so I apologize for the open floor plans that we promote. But that is, I think we're at the pendulum swing of it becoming a little bit harder for remote teams to work together.
Well, yeah, okay, one last word for that. Yes, and I believe teams become more networked. So if you distribute yourself, then that's an obvious thing because you have more tools available to actually collaborate across locations. And the other thing is you also network in the same location. So there's, depending on, so you do not really have that much project teams anymore. You do have project teams sort of coming from the business side that you have to be in a project team. But what I see in larger teams and larger companies is that there's teams that are not project teams besides project teams. So you have your project team for project A and project B. And then the people doing DevOps, or sorry, the people pushing DevOps into the culture are birds of a feather and actually sit together and work together every now and then. And then you have a tribe that might be interested in how front end works and a tribe for API design. And so people sort of help solve problems together that are not necessarily working together in the project sense. So the understanding of team may shift from I'm working on this thing and these people work with me on this thing or do the same thing as I do, to more like these people are more interested or have the same problems that I have or solve the same problems that I solve, so we collaborate. So I guess that's how that changes.
Okay, thank you very much. From what I know, and definitely you guys also know, in Romania it's quite the movement to go towards remote working, and from what I've seen is a thing that developers like, and I think the traffic has something to say in that as well in Bucharest. Okay, from what I'm seeing, the time's up, but I think the guys will still be here, and you can chat with them after this panel and share your impressions. Thank you very much for your questions today. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for the organizers giving me the opportunity to be on stage with the great guys. I wanted to have my own rock band and be on the stage, and now 15 years later I'm married to a software developer, so in your face, Metallica. And thank you very much for your presence, and have a great one today. Bye-bye.